So today we're going to be installing airbag suspension into a VZ Commodore Ute, and I'll show you all the steps on how to get this into that. Let's get into it.
Designed to impress.
How's it going, guys? So today we're back bagging a VZ Commodore Ute, and I'm going to show you the full steps of how I put in or install airbag suspension in the rear only. Now when it comes to airbag suspension, there are a few different options and there's many different ways and different things you can have in accessories and upgrades and whatnot. So firstly, I'll get into air suspension. So if you don't know what air suspension is, this isn't the video for that, but as a real quick rundown, it's a means of lifting and lowering your vehicle through air. So basically, you have air springs, air bellows, whatever replacement. So as the air pressure builds up inside them, they extend and it lifts your vehicle up. So that's the simple terms of what it is. Now, when you're getting into installing them, there's different sorts of kits and styles that you can do. So what I'm referring to here is a base kit. And a base kit is just the absolute basics to get onboard control. So that means you can adjust the heights and whatnot on board with electronic switches. I don't like to use the paddle switches and whatnot. So you've got electronic switches, which means electronic gauges, electronic valve block. So you've got solenoid valves rather than just mechanical paddle switches. So when I talk about a base kit, this is what I'm referring to. It's just the tank, compressor, manual control switches, so a gauge panel with left and right independent control. Now, because this is onboard control and it's independent, it doesn't have an ECU or auto level, it's deemed for off-road use only. So make sure you know what you're doing with airbag suspension. It's not all of it's legal. So if you are doing a kit like this, you need to make sure that you know what the ramifications are and the legalities. So this is an off-road use only kit. It is just for shows and whatnot, all the rest of it. So that's what this sort of type of install is. The next stage from here is auto level. So you have some form of auto level controller, level ride, AccuAir, airlift, etc., etc. Then basically they have height sensors in all four corners. There are pressure sensing systems only as well, but pressure isn't a good indication of height. Obviously, if you put a heap of weight in the back of the vehicle or whatever, the pressure increases in the bags because you're compressing them more, but the height drops. So pressure is never really a great indicator. It gives you a good indicator, and it is necessary in some situations. For cross-jacking and whatnot, it's hard to determine based off the height alone. But if you're wanting to get a full road legal setup for air suspension, you have to go down that path of, well, at least in Australia and in Victoria especially. So you have to have the auto level system, the ECU, which basically has four corners that it gets all the height data from. So as the height changes, it knows it's changed because there's a variation in voltage, and then the ECU can make corrections and inflate or deflate the correct valve to raise or lower that side of that corner of the vehicle. So that's what's required. And then also you can't adjust it while you're in motion. You can't adjust two separate axle groups in motion. There's some things that you can do, so you are able to maneuver to lift up, to get up over speed humps and whatnot. You're not able to air out while driving or drop below your ride height or your selected height, which is usually set to the ride height that you want to go to, so 110 mil or whatever it is, and you can't drop below that 100 mil legal requirement in Victoria. So that's the different sort of steps. Then you've obviously got dual tanks, larger tanks, custom hardlines, show install, dual compressors, single compressors, digital gauges, analog gauges. So this is the absolute basic, just a 2-gallon tank, single compressor, hidden install, electronic valve blocks, a two-way valve block, and analog gauges. So you actually run airlines to the gauge itself. It's got dual needles to tell you left and right. But there are options out there that you can do digital gauges. So I sell digital gauges as well with pressure sensor units or pressure senders, and they vary voltage, and then they give you a digital readout, so you can actually get them in a mechanical type of needle or in just plain numbers. So just, you know, it shows what pressure is actually in the bag. So as well as, you know, 3-way gauges, one for the tank and bags, or 4-way for all round, 5-way, etc., etc. So there's heaps of different options. There's remote controls, you know, you name it. There's lots of different options for it, but this is the basic of the basic. So we'll go out, we'll pull the hard top off the back of the ute so we get access to the tub, and then we'll get stuck into installing these bags. So the hard top's been removed off the ute, so now we can pull the tub liner out. Once the tub liner's out, we've got access to the fuel cavity. So we'll pull the access panel off that, or the top panel off, and that'll give us the spot to put all the tank and compressor and all the rest of it for the air management. So whip this off, take the cavity top off, and then yeah, start installing the tank and compressor and all the rest of it. So we're all ready now to install the tank, but before we do, we need to get all these brass fittings all attached to the tank, because it's too hard to try and do in there. So get all that attached to the tank first, and then we'll get the tank in. So we'll go ahead and get the water trap and the compressor fittings and all that sort of stuff attached to the tank, and yeah, then we'll get it installed. So this is the tank we're using. It's a 2-gallon Hoosier tank, or Hoosier, however you want to say it. But it's a 2-gallon tank, so we've got 3 different ports we can use. One on both ends and then one at the bottom for the drain. So mounting in this direction, you always want the drain to be at the bottom to drain out any moisture. So we've got a swivel elbow here for our drain. That will connect to this bottom port. At one end we've got this brass elbow, and that will go at one of these ends for the compressor inlet, and then at the other end we've got our water trap. So we'll go ahead and get all these done. Now, the sealant I use is just a Loctite 577, just a high pressure thread sealant, and it sort of bites up good, so you just don't have to apply a heap, but it's recommended to leave it set sort of for a few hours sort of before you start putting pressure on that in. But we're going to be well and truly outside a few hours by the time we get all this hooked up and then pull the interior apart and run all the wiring. So go ahead and get these fittings on. that's all the fittings on the tank. So as you can see, we've got, this is the exhaust side that goes to our valve block. So we've got the water trap and then an elbow up just to get up to the sort of 2 levels in the cavity there. So then we've got our pressure switch, and notice how I put the pressure switch after the water trap. That's because any moisture and stuff that gets into these pressure switches can kill them. So I just like to put them downside of the tank. It still gets tank pressure because the check valve is up here. So you're still registering accurate pressure of the actual tank, while also keeping it a fair distance from where the compressor inlet is. So all the hot air comes in from the compressor inlet, and then it makes its way to this trap. This sort of tries to keep some of the moisture out to go to the valves, and then that protects the service life of the valves as well as the pressure switch. So this end here then goes to the valve block, so that's nice and accessible there. Now notice, you probably can't really tell, but see if it focuses, see how the fitting sits up or sits lower than the actual legs. You can see sort of in that line of sight. So now normally if you're mounting on a flat surface, I will space these up. I mean, if you can cut them off and weld new brackets or whatever up, but I usually put spacers on because I make wooden bottom plates that I paint up first, so I usually just space them up an extra layer just to get that clearance. But in this case, where we're mounting it, has heaps of holes cut out in the hole that's the floor to underneath, so it's still not the lowest part of the car, so it's not going to hit anything. It'll be fine, but it's just that will allow that to sort of sit down and recess into those little holes. Plus it's really thin sheet metal, so we'll get these template mounted out for these mounting holes and get the tank bolted in, and then we'll sort out the compressor situation and then put all the fittings on the valve block and get that installed. So take this over to the car and we'll go in. So the tank's all mounted in there now, nice and sturdy. A bit of a pain to sort of get the bolts up. Ideally, you sort of probably just want to weld a nut to the bottom of the feet and then just do the bolt up to the bottom. But I use spring washers and some nuts, but and put the nuts and bolts up from underneath. But whatever gets the job done, so that's nice and secure. So now we can mount the compressor. So I'll put the compressor on and we'll put some nut certs in and bolt it down, and then the valve block, and we'll get all the fittings on the valve block and then assemble that. We've also got the drain airline put on, ready to go to route to the back there, and the drain will act as the tank drain as well as a emergency fill point. So it'll have a Schrader valve on it, just so you can pump it up just like a normal tyre at the servo. If the compressor ever fails or whatever, you still can get air in the tank. So but it does have a check valve after the tank. That's very important, so that way if you ever have a leak or compressor fail or something, or your tank runs out of air, if it drops or the tank explodes or something, not that that'll happen because they're pressure tested and everything, but if it ever did happen, or this line collapses or something, your bags aren't going to drop, because everything after that check valve is already a pressurized system, and once it's up to pressure it'll hold that pressure. So anything that happens to the tank, you can fully drain it, you can pull it all off, disconnect the whole thing, and yeah, you won't lose height in your bags. So that's a must, and not only a legal requirement in Victoria and that, but it's a must-have for safety and just for convenience. So route that to the back, get that mounted in the valve block. So let's get on to that. So we've got the compressor and the valve block all mounted now. So now it's time to get the electronics sorted. So pull out the center console, mount the gauge panel, do all the plumbing for the gauge panel, so the airlines for the gauges, and then all the wiring, get it back into here to the valve block and the compressor wiring, and then start doing all the wiring at this end and get power to everything.
Here we go again. Trying hard, but you wanna be my friend. Ain't no place to hide, ain't no one to run to. Here we go again. Call my bluff, I'ma be here till the end. I'm the one you ride, I'm the one you ride to. If you don't wanna change, ain't no place to hide, ain't no one to run to. If you don't wanna change, I can help you out. 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 Here we go again. Time is up and I'm calling up my friends. Ain't no wonder why, ain't no one to ride to. Here we go again. Call me up and you wanna be my friend. I'm the one you ride, I'm the one you ride to. If you don't wanna change, ain't no place to hide, ain't no one to run to. If you don't wanna change, I can help you out. 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 I can help you out.
So we've got our gauge panel wiring done. So we've got a dual needle gauge, so that's left and right bag. Airlines going to the back of the gauge here. So we've got 1/8 inch NPT fittings going to 4mm hose. 4mm hose is readily available, so that's what I use. You can use 1/8 hose because it's a bit smaller, but 4mm's more popular because it's what they use in some trucks and stuff too. So that's why I just keep rolls of 4mm. But we've got the power going to the center pins on these spade connectors here, and then they're a dual-way switch, so rocker is momentary both ways, and that allows you to inflate both bags left and right independently. So we've got that. We've got our light connected to our source wire, so this will connect to the vehicle ignition. So whenever the ignition's on, this is live, and then we've got the light for it is also just turns on rather than connect it to an illumination wire or anything. Now you've got these other two wires coming off the back here. I like to have a compressor kill switch, so basically the power that feeds this whole thing also feeds one of these pins, and then the other pin's connected to a switch that I also mount in the center console, which I'll show you shortly. And when you flick that switch, then it feeds back to our 5-core wire, which is going to control the power to the pressure switch. So at the other end of this loom, we've just wrapped in the split conduit here, but at the other end of this loom we've got some 5-core wire and the two airlines for the hose, or for the gauges, sorry. So that'll go to the valve block. I haven't connected or terminated the plug for the valve block yet because I want to get this through the grommet into the car first. So I'll run it through the vehicle before I terminate this end and put the actual plug on for the valve block. So I'll go ahead and get this gauge mounted to our center console and the hole drilled through for that, and that switch I was talking about. We'll get that and put it into the center console, and then start running compressor wire through the car, making the fuse bracket mount, or the fuse holder bracket, which is just a circuit breaker. And then yeah, we'll get this run to the car and terminate it and start hooking up the valve block and getting everything working. So the compressor wire's been cut off to length and just ran through the factory grommet for now. So there's a factory grommet on the passenger side of the vehicle that allows you to just drill like a tiny little hole. I punched through a tiny little hole smaller than the wire. So you have it smaller than the wire, so that way when you push your wire through, obviously it seals a bit better, it's a bit tight. And then it runs up through where the factory loom cable management is and comes down to the ABS module here. So in front of the ABS module, I make a custom bracket that holds the circuit breaker. So it's an auto reset circuit breaker for the compressor, so if anything ever goes wrong, it'll just reset and turn itself back on once it's safe to do so. So make a custom bracket for that, so that way you're not drilling any holes into the car and anything rusting and all that sort of stuff. So it goes from there straight to the positive battery, nice short run, so there'll be no issues with, you know, in case anything ever shorts out or anything, you've got a really short run that it can't really short on anything. So you always want to keep your run from your battery to your fuse as short as possible, so make sure you do that. And now, yeah, we're on to running it down the side of the vehicle and into the tray and start working on wiring and inside the fuel cavity there. Wiring's all done in the vehicle now, so the center console controls the power to everything for the air suspension side of things. So there's a accessory wire in the center console, which is just a cigar plug. Then it runs down behind the seats we put a little hole in the corner and put a cable gland in there to stop any moisture and stuff getting into the vehicle. And then you lock the cable gland up and you got a nice secure location. It's just like basically like a grommet, but I prefer to use the cable glands for that sort of thing, just because you're not trying to worry about, you know, big wires trying to pull through. So you put a nut on one end and lock it in and then run your cable through that. So that's all done into the tray or into the fuel cavity area, and then we've terminated the wires for the valve box, so that's all hooked up. So now it's just a matter of, you know, turning the key, making sure the compressor fires up, getting it up to pressure, making sure it all turns off with the pressure switch and everything, and testing, make sure all the wiring for the valve blocks are left and right, and inflate and deflate is in the correct expected orientation to what we're expecting to get out of it. So let's go turn the key and see if we can get the compressor to fire up. All right. Let's give it a test. So turn the ignition on. Yep, gauge lights up. There's no compressor at the moment. I've installed a kill switch. So let's hit the kill switch. There we go. Compressor's working fine. We'll give the valves a test. Left. Yep, just clicks on all four. So we'll we'll get the car started so we're not flattening the battery, and get the compressor up to pressure. And in the back, while the car's running and the compressor's building up, we'll just take one of the terminals off the pressure switch just to make sure it's all functioning correctly, and get it up to pressure and see if there's any leaks or anything. So test the compressor and it's all working and functioning correctly, and the valve block, so all the wiring's correct, so we can put the rest of the interior back together and get all that sorted, get it up on the hoist, and then start installing the bags. So the main reason why I do air supply first is because obviously as soon as you take the springs out, put the bags in, if you haven't got air in the bags, the car's on the ground. So get all the air stuff sorted first, get it all working, and then you put the bags and that in, so that way you have the sort of least time with it on the ground. So let's get some bags in. Got the wheels off, got the springs out, so now it's time to get rid of the spring locators. We'll give them a bit of a chop, get rid of them, and clean it up, and then we'll go ahead and drill our holes to mount the bags. These holes, the way that I do these, rather than use any upper brackets that just tech screw in or anything, I don't really like that, so I prefer to bolt them straight through. Now the only problem is you don't have access to the top, so you drill a couple of small holes in the, well, a couple of 24mm holes or whatever in the tub at the top in the tray, and then you just blank them off with grommets later on, just to protect it, any moisture in that getting through, even though you've got a tub liner, so it's fine, but yeah, just to protect it and stop anything falling through. So go ahead and give them a bit of a zip off and cut them off and clean them up and get the bags bolted in. We've got a nice flat surface now to mount our bag to, so print off your template. My bag kits come with one of these just to get your layout for your holes, the two mounting holes and the air fitting to go through. So we've got a bit of tape. And now what you want to do is offset the bag slightly out towards the outside of the vehicle, that does two things. So firstly, you clear the inner rail, so it stops the bag rubbing as much on the inner rail when aired out. And the other thing, where these two holes go for the actual bag itself, there's some supports up in under that. So if you don't offset it, you'll drill straight through the middle of one of the supports to get your bolt through. So I'll take a bit of tape. On there. So I was making 3 points of tape, and now what you do is you line up this outer edge with this outside of the spring seat. So this spring cup or seat or whatever you want to call it is bigger than this the outer diameter of these 7-inch bags. So if you line the outer edge up with this outside, you offset enough to clear that and stop rubbing on the inside. So still center it up vertically, but yeah, get it offset to the outside in this direction. So I just get down and stick him like so. As you can see here, how we're much closer to the outside here than we are over here. There's a big gap here, so you want to offset outwards so that way you don't rub on the inner rail, and also where these two holes go up, you don't hit the supports that sort of run up on the inside there. So now we'll go ahead and get these all center punched out, and yeah, get the bag, all the holes drilled out and the bag mounted. So all the holes are drilled for the bags now underneath. We've still got to drill the holes in the tray to access to actually put the socket down to do up the nuts, but now we're up to do the final part for the bottom to get the ready prep for the bags. So we've got these little square plates. They're just a bit of 5mm steel plate that's got a 3/8 inch UNC hole in the middle, like threaded, so you can actually thread the bag down into it. And now, yeah, so we'll go and lower the car, put the battery clamp on just to protect the ECU from spiking and whatnot, and then, yeah, get this tack welded in and put it down and put the holes in the tub ready for the bags to fully bolt through. So go ahead and get this installed and show you how to do that. So we've got all our holes drilled now. Got a little access hole at the top here, ready for the airline to run through, and just giving a quick paint just to stop any rust. So now it's time to grab our bag and simply thread it into the bottom, and then we'll lift the whole control arm and everything and get the top bolted through, and then do up the nuts from above. So get this threaded in. Like so, and you just want the air fitting facing the back, so that's where the hole was, so that way we can turn it around and get the airline out through this hole here. So we'll go and lift the control arm up and get that bolted in. So where our bags are bolted in now, they're just bolted in through the top, through the access holes that we made earlier. Now we've got to get, so one of the tricky parts to do at this point is to spin the swivel elbow around so it faces the hole that we've put up here at the top of the spring seat. So basically I try and get like an Allen key or something with a bit of a right angle, hook it and try and bend it back, and then get your finger in there and get it to the right spot. Once that's in the right spot, then you can push your airline on, so cut it off nice and clean with some cutters, and then give it a little bit of O-ring lubricant on it just to help it slide in, so if there's any dirt and stuff it won't seal properly and it'll start leaking. So get that as clean of cut as you can, and then push it in, and then we'll route it around in under and then into where the tray is. There's already a big open hole in the factory hole that's there, so we'll just run it through that and put some saddles every so often just to hold it so it doesn't move anywhere and flop around. So we'll get that installed and ran into the fuel cavity, and then hook it up to the valve block and get some air in them. So everything's all in now. Airlines ran out of this hole that we make and then routed down into the cabin, and just hooks it up to the valve block. So now it's time to put the shocks back on to restrict our movement of the bags so we don't overinflate. And then, time to pump them up and test for some leaks, and hopefully have no leaks, and get the wheels on, and we're good to go. Had a bit of a soap test, doesn't seem to be any leaks in the bags so far, so obviously a rest test overnight will determine if there's any real big leaks or anything, but soap test the connections and nothing seems immediately apparent. So we're going to whack the wheels back on and get it down and put some yellow walls on just to match the calipers. Yellow seems to be a complementing colour for purple, so we're going to chuck a set of yellow walls on and this car's done. Alright, so that wraps it up for the VZ Ute. So hopefully that gives a bit of insight of how to install rear suspension, or how I install rear suspension. Obviously, an order level setup, you will have height sensors and an ECU, and wiring and all that will change because you won't have center console switches or anything like that. But this is sort of the basics of the bag install and the wiring a little bit, and the compressor lines and that sort of thing will be the same. Obviously, you won't have a pressure switch to control it. You'll have a pressure sensor, and the ECU will do the controlling of that using pulse width and whatever else. So that's how I install rear bags into VZ and VU, VY. It's all the same. Obviously, the interior changes on VU, but it's the same basic concept, and the way that they bolt in is all the same. So sedan and everything's the same as well. Obviously, where you don't have a tray, so where the bags actually come through is behind the seats, and wagon's the same, doesn't have a tray, so it comes in through behind the floor. So that's the way that I do it, and that's the way I prefer to do it, just because bolting them in is, I just like that idea and that concept better than a couple of mil of tech screw or something going into sheet metal. So I don't like brackets and those sorts of things, because it's just, once you strip out that tech screw, it's gone, whereas you put a bolt top and bottom, and it can't ever pull through or anything, and it just much safer. Well, that's the way that I do it, and that's the way I've always done it. So coming up in the future, hopefully if I get time to film it, I'll get a video of a custom hardline boot setup that I've got coming up. Hopefully I get time to film it. I'll try and make time. So if you don't want to miss that, then I'd suggest subscribing. Maybe it's up to you though. And hopefully if you want to stick around and watch some more videos, I'll try and get some more how-to videos on different topics, as well as air suspension and car audio and whatever else, and try and get some more unique stuff, and film it and show it all to you guys. So thanks for watching. If you're still here and stuck around to the end, then props to you. So catch you in the next one, where hopefully we do something a bit more custom. Then it runs through into a grommet it's a start again. It's called cable. What is it called? Cable gland. Cable gland. That's the name of it. Fucking cable gland. All right.